many of y'all have ever played the game Capture the Flag? Oh, a lot of hands going up. There can be 2 or more teams, and the goal is to capture the flag of the other team or other teams. And each team has a flag or some object at their base, and you must go across the line into the other team's territory and steal their flag and bring it back safely to your own base. That's the whole purpose. When we go to Camp Living Water, many of the teens and kids know about that. One night, they play Capture the Flag, and it's a lot of fun to watch. But my favorite part of capturing the flag is when somebody gets tagged, and they have to go in prison. There's like a little prison there by the base. They have to go sit in prison. It's very interesting to watch how the other team will find ways to free their friend. And so they come together and they'll discuss and say, all right, I'm going to go on this side. I'm going to distract them. And as they're looking for me this way, y'all run around and tag them and set our guys free. Now, just like last weekend's message about Duck, Duck, Goose, I believe today's message is more like Capture the Flag, where we have to sometimes cross over that enemy line, go into the jail, spiritually speaking, and tag them, because people need to be set free. And it'll make more sense as we go further in today's message. If you have your Bibles, go ahead and find the book of Job, chapter 2, and verse 11. The book of Job, chapter 2, and verse 11. Our message is called Circles. As you know, Circle is the name of our small group ministry right here at Clearview. And the main point of our message is this: the living true God is a rescuing God. He sent his Son, the second person of the Godhead, to cross the line and come into this world to set us free. That's what Jesus did. He won our freedom by dying on the cross for us and rising from the grave on the 3rd day. And now he wants us to go out and set others free. Just like you got to come together, our guy is in trouble, or the gal is in trouble, this is what we have to do to set them free. We have to come and tag them so they can go free. Job chapter 2, verse 11. Now when Job's 3 friends heard of all this adversity that had come upon him, each one came from his own place. Eliphaz, the Temanite, Bildad, the Shuhite, and Zophar, the Naamathite, for they had made an appointment together to come and mourn with him and to comfort him. The book of Job is perceived by some people to be just an ancient piece of literature from a primitive time with little or no benefit to people today. Some people even look at this book as being sort of depressing and pointless. I remember growing up, we used to have family devotions. And just like any family, we would always do it, and sometimes it was last minute. We would say, oh, we forgot to do our devotions. And then mom and dad would say, well, it's time to go to bed, but let's quickly do this. And I remember this one time, my brother said, okay, I'm just going to open the Bible and see where it goes. And when you just open the Bible, where does it typically go? It goes to the book of Psalms or book of Job. And so it was like, oh, no, that's too depressing. Let's find another place. And then we would turn a few pages and go to Psalms. Some people think that this book is just depressing and even pointless. At the end of everything, it is simply like God says, I made this, I made this, I made this. Have you considered this, this, this? Have you considered the dinosaurs? And then finally Job says, okay, I'll stop. Some rich guy named Job had a wonderful life. He had plenty of possessions. He had a big family. He tried to live right, do right. And then one day Satan got permission from God to test him. And God actually gave him permission. Okay. And Satan went out and within 24 hours destroyed everything that Job had. The Sabians, this ancient tribe of people, raided his farm and stole his oxen and donkeys and killed the servants. Fire fell from heaven on his sheep and the servants keeping them, and they all died. The Chaldeans stole all his camels and killed the servants. And then a great wind destroyed the house where his children, his adult children, had gathered. They were having a celebration. It's wonderful to see siblings getting along, and they were getting along and having a good time, and it destroyed the house and killed his 7 sons and 3 daughters and their entire family. Gone. If that wasn't enough, Satan even got permission from God to attack Job's body. He said, hey, look, you're taking things away. Touch his body and he will deny you. And God said, okay, do it. You just can't kill him. And so Satan goes out there, attacks him, and he is now covered in boils. So we are left with the image of this man sitting way out there in the distance of time past on an ash heap. He has a potsherd in his hand. You know, potsherd is a piece of pottery. He's covered with sores, and you can see pus and blood and water coming out, and he's always just scratching himself. And his wife comes to him, and she gives him this advice. I mean, she is actually a good woman. She's saying, look, you need relief. Just curse God, and God will kill you because I cannot bear to see you this way. People often blame his wife, but actually she is never blamed. She was simply saying, just do what you need to do and get out of this life. And all Job could say was, shall we indeed accept good from God, and shall we not accept adversity? That's all he could say. I mean, God does what he wants to do. We got to take what comes. Job was at a low point in his life with very little faith and plenty of discouragement and doubts about the character of God. I am not sure what God is up to. I'm not sure who he is now. I'm not going to curse him. I'm not going to reject what he's saying. I just don't understand what is going on. And in his emotional state, he questioned the justice of God, and he even wanted to put God on trial. I want to put him in trial, and I have some questions for him. His 3 friends came to console him, but really they were not of much help. They ended up accusing him of some sin in his life, or they ended up accusing him of something else, so not much help. And then God showed up, and as I just told you a few moments ago, God began by telling him, have you considered this? Have you seen what I made? Have you seen how I made the animals and all this stuff? Have you considered the dinosaur? Do you know the book of Job talks about dinosaurs? Last year I preached a message called Leviathan, and God says, consider the behemoth, this land creature that is massive. Legs are as big as tree trunks. Have you considered the Leviathan, this sea creature that breathes out fire? Have you considered all this? And ultimately Job's response is, okay, I'm sorry, okay. Here's an awakening moment. Is that all there is to the book of Job? I mean, seems like a very primitive book with a very primitive understanding of trials. What do? You just got to go, okay. I mean, God is big. He makes big stuff. George Bernard Shaw was an Irish playwright, a literary critic. And he made a wisecrack one time about the book of Job. He said, if I complain that I am suffering unjustly, it is no answer to say, can you make a hippopotamus? What is Bernard Shaw saying? He said, here you are having to mourn over the graves of your children. Here you are having lost everything. Here you are suffering with this sickness. And God is saying, how about dinosaurs? How about the hippopotamus? How does that relate with anything? That's what George Bernard Shaw is pointing out. It makes no sense. God is giving an answer to a question we're not asking. My question is why? And God is saying, did you check out the dinosaur? How do you see the book of Job? How do you see God's answer to suffering and trials through this book? Maybe you're here this morning and you're like, never considered anyways. I'm praying this morning that you will be alert and you will listen and that your mind will be firing on all cylinders. I don't know how you go to church, but I hope this morning you will have a very different approach to what I'm sharing with you. Don't get distracted. The Holy Spirit has brought you here. Shut off your phones. There's no reason for you to scroll. You're addicted. You have a problem. Put that away. You got plenty of time. But take the time this morning, because could it be that you are about to go through hell? And this may be God's way of saying, let me show you the answer to suffering. The book of Job is not just some primitive book about some primitive man. It's not some depressing book, as we kids said, oh, that's too depressing. It is not some pointless book. You're asking a question and God is answering something else. There's some deep, very applicable message for us. And I'm hoping we'll see that. It's going to be deep, so get ready for that. How could a story like Job have any application for our lives today? To start with, there are two things that we must amend in our understanding of the book of Job. Two things. The first is this. It is true that the book of Job is an ancient book. It is an ancient book for three reasons. Number one is the unusual character of the language of the book of Job. I'm not talking about the English translation. I'm talking about the Hebrew. When you look at the Hebrew book of Job and compare it with Genesis or Psalms or Isaiah or Jeremiah, it is different. It is not the Hebrew of Jerusalem. It has Aramaic influences. It has rare words and unique words, and also it reflects a combination of various dialects of Hebrew. Hence, scholars have concluded that this is an old book. It's an ancient book. Goes back, way, way back. How far back? I just mentioned a few moments ago, it mentions dinosaurs. Dinosaurs were still living a little bit after the flood. And then because of, we don't know, stagnated water, because of microbes or whatever, they began to die off. I covered this in our series. I talked about dinosaurs. Leviathan was the message. Some of you remember that. By the way, we heard more about that message than any other message prior to that. Kids loved it. Adults loved it. But dinosaurs were still existing 100 or 200 years after the flood. How long back is that? I don't believe the world is 4 billion years old. Let's put it to a rest. I covered this in our series in 2021 and 2022, Content 1, Content 2. We talked about, at the most, maybe 7,000 years. So we're talking about the flood, which is about 4,500 years ago. Job's book talks about dinosaurs that were existing even after the flood. So this book of Job is no more than maybe 4,200 years old. What else do we know about this book? It is an ancient book because of the unusual character of the language, but also dinosaurs are mentioned. Something else, this book references the Ice Age. I'm not talking about the movie. Ice Age. No other book in the Old Testament talks about ice and snow like the book of Job. Let me give you a couple of references. Job chapter 37, verse 9. From the chamber of the south comes the whirlwind, and cold from the scattering winds of the north. By the breath of God, ice is given, and the broad waters are frozen. Job chapter 38 and verse 22. Question, have you entered the treasury of snow? This is not just have you seen snow, winter wonderland. No, he's saying there is a treasury of snow. Where is this snow coming from? Have you seen the treasury of hail. Verse 29, from whose womb comes the ice? Means who is birthing this ice? It's everywhere. And the frost of heaven, who gives it birth? The waters harden like stone, and the surface of the deep is frozen. Now, Job could have been talking about, just a frozen lake in the Middle East. He could have been talking about some unusually harsh winter. I believe he is referring to the Ice Age. Now, if you listen to secular scientists, when they talk about the Ice Age, they say things like, for thousands of years, the earth was covered in ice. And it was completely covered, 100% just covered in ice, layers and layers and meters in depth. Is that really true? Is that really what we find? To the contrary, that is not true. For one, it's not the entire earth was covered in ice, maybe 30%. Today, only 10% is covered in the north and the south poles. But back then, 30%. And how did this ice age come about? It was caused by the Great Flood. How did it happen? Dr. Jake Hebert gives a model. By the way, all these things are models. You know that, right? When scientists say that this is how they're simply giving you an educated guess. You didn't have cameras back then. Measuring weather did not begin until the last century, and maybe a little bit somewhere 300 years ago. How do we know? Well, again, there's a model that I believe is more accurate, which is oceans became hot from the magma coming from the catastrophic plate tectonics. When God began to open the windows of heaven, and water began to fall, rain came down, torrential rain, and then the fountains of the deep were broken up. Well, what's in the core of the earth? Magma came out, and it heated up the ocean water, and because of that, lots of evaporation, which caused much more snowfall. There were volcanoes everywhere. When we went on our retreat, we went and filmed in a lot of these places, and you're going to see that in the series coming up. I'll talk about that in just a few moments. A lot of volcanoes, thousands upon thousands. And when these volcanoes began to erupt, they are erupting, what? Through the plate tectonics, aerosol. These suspended particles and droplets in the air, which blocks sunlight. So here water is heating up, evaporating, causing snowfall, all this aerosol blocking sunlight and sun rays, so the summers are cold instead of being hot. And so you have sheets of ice, not covering the entire globe, but it is covering at least 30%. And these ice glaciers did not make it to the Middle East as much because it's at a low level. So people like Job and others who are living right outside Babel and other places like that, they have heard of these massive snow drifts. They have heard about these large sheets of ice elsewhere. And Job talks about that. Again, as I mentioned, we'll be going back to our content series through Genesis and answer some of these questions about the ice age. I'm not going to cover more on that today, but we're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about climate change. We're going to talk about global warming. You say, oh, we talk about that at church? Here's the problem. Because the church doesn't address these issues, the world keeps going, and politicians keep making policies, and your pocketbooks is affected. Amen. And then we complain about it. We say, oh, this. Well, you don't know the issues. You buy in the propaganda just like everybody else. You cannot give a reasoned defense why the Bible is accurate. You cannot give a scientific, and I said scientific. We got plenty of good scientists even on our side who also objectively look at data. We don't talk about that. We just go along with what everybody else says. Oh yeah, the earth is collapsing. And here's the sad part. Many times I preach and I tell, but you all go back to believing the same old garbage. I don't understand that. You're conditioned. Some point in time you have to say, I know what they're saying, but I don't believe. About sicknesses, you believe the same thing. It's like, okay. So we're going to talk about this coming up, and it is essential because our kids need to know what to believe and discern between right and wrong, because there is a fight coming for them. So they need to know, is this climate change thing, how real is this? This ice age that they talk about, there were multiple ice ages, is that really true? Well, we'll talk about that in the series ahead. All this to say that the book of Job probably goes back to a century or two after Noah's flood, probably a generation before Abraham. Abraham lived about 2100 BC, so more than likely Job was 2200 BC. From our time, that's just 4200 years ago. But it is an ancient book. Now, here's a statement I want you to hear very carefully. The age of the book does not make it irrelevant. It should make it timeless. The truths in this book are timeless. I know we all have AIs and ChatGPT and all that. We use it here. I mean, it's wonderful, but doesn't mean that that book is primitive, old-fashioned, pointless. No. It's timeless. Something else I want to point out to you. Remember, I told you two things we need to change. One is that this book is timeless, is ancient, but it's timeless. Second thing is this: it is not true that Job is just some primitive book about primitive people. When you think about Job, don't think of him just sitting way in the distance in time past, in the shadows of time, sitting there just scratching himself. No. In fact, those people were very sophisticated, very civilized. Again, we have to combat the evolutionary propaganda that tells us that we all came from the cave. We were cavemen, and then we became hunters-gatherers, and then we built these little settlements, became towns, became cities, we became advanced. We learned language, and then business, and communication, and travel. Now we are where we are. So it all began in the cave. We got to stop that. Did you know that Job talks about cavemen? Did y'all know that? Job talks about cavemen. Y'all don't believe me, you're just staring at me. So go to Job chapter 30 and verse 1. Job chapter 30 and verse 1. I know some of y'all are wondering, what does this have to do with rescuing the capture the flag? It seems like a whole different lifetime. What does that have to do with anything? We'll come to that in just a few moments, so stay with me, okay? Job chapter 30, verse 1. Job says, "But now they mock me." Who is mocking you, Job? Men younger than I. All right, some people who are younger than you are making fun of you as you're going through a difficult time. They're taunting you, they're mocking you. Whose fathers I disdain to put with the dogs of my flock. What did you just say? What Job is saying is that these people who are mocking me, I wouldn't even put their fathers in a pen with my dogs because they will corrupt my dogs. My dogs don't have any fleas, but they will give them fleas. I mean, he is really ticked off, isn't he? Who are these people that Job is talking about? Well, keep reading in verse 3. They are gaunt. Gaunt means their eyes are sunken in. From want and famine, fleeing late to the wilderness, desolate and waste. I mean, these are people who are just running. They can never settle down. From here to here to here to here, from this church to that church to that church to this church to this one to that one. Who pluck mallow. Mallow were these tiny plants, still you can find them that are edible. It's not like a good steak. It's not like a pork chop. It's not like some good fried baked chicken. No, these are mallows. You just find them and just nibble away. and they're found by the bushes and broom tree roots for their food. They see them over there in the corner digging away and finding roots and eating. Verse 5, they were driven out from among men. They shouted at them as at a thief. Means these people have been driven away. Why? Because they steal. They don't just steal stuff, they steal people's reputations. These are people, they steal people's joys. So they have to be driven away. Get out of here. Don't let him in. Don't let her in. She's going to steal. They will steal your joy. Still don't get it. Who are you talking about, Job? Listen to verse 6. They had to live in the clefts of the valleys, in caves of the earth and the rocks. You know, a lot of things that we believe about cavemen and what cavemen were about, we get a new discovery. We found somewhere in this Siberian cave, we found human remains, and we wonder what these people were like, who were our ancestors. To the contrary, they were not very good people. Most of the time, they were causing trouble and had to be driven away. It's not that they were subhuman, no, but they were people who would come into a civilized community and tear it down. I know some of y'all are confused, like, where are we going? Stay with me. Verse 7, among the bushes they brayed, like a donkey they bray, under the nettles. Nettles were these tiny plants that have stings on them. Get them on your hand and you'll have a rash or irritation, like poison oak, poison ivy. Under the nettles, these sting leaf plants, they nestled. They don't have the sense enough to say that you are causing yourself damage. Verse 8, they were sons of fools, yes, sons of vile men. They were scourged from the land, and now I am their taunting song. So these are not helpless people. We need to go and educate them. We need to help them. No, these are not good people. They taunt Job. What would motivate these people to do this to a man who is going through a rough time in his life? What would motivate somebody? Cavemen are still around today. Some of y'all are finally connecting the dots. Cavemen are still around. Oh, they will live in nice homes, nice cars, go to nice churches, but they love to revel in somebody's misery. When someone's going through a rough time, they'll come and just stomp on them. They like to know more about what's going on in your life. They want to get the gory details. Tell me more. As a pastor, I sit and talk to people. I have to hear. And the old sinful Adamic nature once in a while creeps up and says, ask this. And I have to ask myself, what is my motivation? My motivation has nothing to do with praying for that person. My motivation has to do with sinful curiosity. So what did they do? So what did she say? And at that moment, I have to say, Holy Spirit, please help me from me. At that moment, I'm being a caveman. I'm being a cave dweller. Cave dwellers are the ones who bray like a donkey, who take a little truth and they embellish it and build a whole story. You have that much time in your hand? You are a cave dweller. City dwellers don't do that. Sophisticated, civilized, godly people don't do that kind of stuff. How about you? Now, do you want to know what civilized people look like? Let's go back to Job chapter 2, verse 11. Our time is very short. Now, when Job's 3 friends heard of all this adversity that had come upon him, each one came from his own place. What do the cave dwellers do? They sneak in, destroy, tear down people's reputation, take a little thing and make something more out of it, taunt somebody who's suffering. What do the friends do? They left everything behind. 3 men, Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite, and all these place names, listen carefully, came later. The book is older. It's like saying 1,000 years ago in America. There was no America 1,000 years ago. But this is the way to identify where this happened. So these three men are much ancient than being a Temanite or Shuhite or an Amathite. Nonetheless, you get the point. For they had made an, you have to look at the screen for this one. They had made an, oh, that's so weak. Try it again. The Hebrew word is yahat. They didn't just rush in and say, let's go see Job. No, they said, let's meet together. We're going to come together because something's wrong with Job. Hey guys, let's meet. Our friend is in trouble. We don't know what's happening. From what I'm hearing is he's lost, his children died. And that someone saw him sitting at this destroyed house, these ash heap, and he is over there, and he is in misery. Guys, can we meet and talk? They made a yahad. They made a goal. They had a plan. Cavemen have no plan other than to just destroy someone's reputation. Civilized, godly people make a plan. Let's come together and talk. I don't just want to go over there and just say whatever comes to my mind and throw some Bible verse on it, or on Facebook put praying. How many of y'all actually pray? There's no lying in church. And it doesn't count. It's like, God bless them. Okay, next. As fast as your fingers are scrolling, I mean, that's the prayer. You know what these men did? They made an appointment to meet together, to come. So they met at this place, maybe an oasis, maybe somewhere there. You see that ford? Let's meet there. That's the tree we used to hang out by. Let's meet there. Let's discuss first. I believe these three probably came and probably cried a little bit, prayed, and said, here's our plan of action. Let's go and see our friend. Men, how many of you would love to have people like that in your life, that when you're going through a difficult time in your life, that they meet together and say, our buddy's in trouble. Let's pray. And then let's go out there and be with him. You know, we often talk about friends, like Facebook has like 2,000 friends and 150 friends. We have all these friends. If we could have genuine one friend in life, you are blessed. If you can 2 or 3 people who will leave everything. I have a vacation, I don't care. I have this trip canceled. This is happening. I'm not worried about that. I have to meet. Let's meet together so we know what to do about our buddy. Ladies, how many of you would love to have people like that in your life? Put everything aside. I have to go see her. These men made an appointment, something else. It says in verse 11, they made a plan of action to come and mourn. The word is nude, which means they will sway their heads. Sway their heads means like they will come and go, so sorry. The word is nakem, which means they will come to console. Here's our plan of action. And when they raised their eyes from afar, Job 2:12, and did not recognize him, they lifted their voices and wept. And each one tore his robe and sprinkled dust on his head toward heaven, a sign of brokenness. How many people do you have in your life that will actually weep and be broken for you? These men sat at a distance and go, I can't even get close to him. I'm going somewhere with this because cavemen don't do that. Cave women don't do that. Cave women pick up the phone and say, who can I tell this next? Now listen to this. Job 2:13. So they finally came up to Job and they sat down with him on the ground 7 days and 7 nights, and no one spoke a word to him. This is before Dr. Freud and Dr. Skinner and the other guy, Dr. Phil. Sometimes you have, no, none of that. They just came and just sat down. You know, they teach us that in pastoral counseling. They teach us that in psychology 101. Sometimes you don't need to say anything. Hey, listen, this is an ancient book, but the truth is timeless. Can you picture these three friends just sitting down next to Job, and no one says a word? Finally, in the 19th, 20th century, understanding the value of silence, they had it right 4,200 years ago. Nothing needs to be said. For they saw that his grief was very great. They saw him. They saw in his eyes, they saw the brokenness, they saw the disillusionment, and for an entire week, they could not say a word. A lot of times our words are meaningless. They don't provide any healing. They're not a salve to a wound. They're just words. You know, last weekend we talked about the cities of refuge. You know, we're encouraging. The series, for those of you who know, is to help you get plugged in, to be part of a Sunday school group, to be part of a discipleship group, Wednesday night Bible study. Get part of that. Tuesday morning, right here at 6 o'clock, we have 40 plus men who gather to pray, and we disperse in 7-8 groups, and it's only 30 minutes. It's our city of refuge. Ladies are starting their time once a month, Tuesday morning at 8 o'clock. They're going to come and they're going to pray. Before the pandemic, we had several small groups, but then they sort of stopped and they haven't been restarted. Circles, what you see circles up here on the board is not just a name of a sermon. Circles are our small groups, our gender-specific 3 to 5 people group, where you come, share, pray for each other. This is what it's about. But you have to understand that we have to go and set people free. Cavemen don't care. That's why when I have anybody ever say to me, well, I'm not the type, I don't do all that, I don't. I'm like, that's a caveman. He wants to live by himself in the caves. That's not a sign of a civilized, godly person. Civilized, godly people make an appointment to go see the brother or a sister in need. This is part of how we grow in the Christian life. This is how we weather the trials of life. Now, I don't have time to go through the whole book of Job. I'm finishing up here. Because what many times people do, they think circles are places where you have bro time. I can spot one just like that, who's coming in there, not for the right reasons, but because we can, red meat eating, Neanderthal. We like this. Do you really think that's what the purpose is for small groups? To have bro time? Or sister, we ladies got to do this. Now, I'll get in trouble there, but do you really think that's the ultimate goal of having circles or small groups, is for you to just vent and be manly and gruff? And those are cavemen. Cavemen do that. And I see a lot of Bible studies out there in groups that, hey, listen, any way people can get to Jesus, I'm all for it. But sometimes I'm going, I think we got it backwards. We're not supposed to be cavemen. We're supposed to be civilized, godly people who make appointments, come together, have a plan of how we can help somebody. And how do you help somebody? Not by being gruff, or not, let's just all go shopping. Let's just throw everything in the wind and we're just going to go away and just be ourselves. That's not what this is about. Here's what happened. As Job is talking to these men, once those men sat down, they all said the wrong things, okay? You will say the wrong things. Nobody will always walk away saying, man, I said the right thing and it just hit the heart and just set that person free. Usually you end up saying things, you go, yeah, that's not what I should have said. That's the wrong verse. That's the wrong comment. So his friends, once they sat down after those 7 days, said things that were not very helpful, but in the process of talking and connecting, Job saw Christ. The ultimate goal of your circle, small group, Sunday school, discipleship is not just that we all know what everything is happening in everybody's life. It's to help people see Christ in their suffering. So let's look at these verses very quickly. The first one is Job chapter 9, verse 32. Listen to what Job says. For he, meaning God, is not a man, as I am, that I may answer him, and that we should go to court together. Remember, Job wants to put God on trial. He said, but he's not a man. I can't take him. Now pay attention to the next verse. Nor is there any mediator between us who may lay his hand on us both, because Job knows that God is sending a mediator who's going to stand between God and us, the God-man, but the mediator hasn't come yet. As I'm going through this struggle, I need the one who's going to touch heaven and earth. I want to know someone who is above and beyond the trials of life, but he understands what I'm going through. Who is the mediator, folks? How interesting is that Job did not walk away saying, well, we're going to let's go hunting and fishing. I see people say that in men's groups who never hunted or fished before. They like to think, that's what I got to do to be a man. I'm here in this group, so No. He's saying, as they're discussing, I need someone who can connect me to heaven, but also touch me down here. He's talking about Jesus Christ. Here's another reference, Job chapter 19. For I know that this is not some ancient book with primitive theology. He is saying, I know that my Redeemer lives. That someone is alive who's going to redeem me, who's going to break the power of sin and remove suffering forever. I know that he lives, and he shall stand at last on the earth. He's not here yet, but he is coming. And after my skin is destroyed, that even if I have to die from this trial, these sufferings, this I know, that in my flesh I shall see God. Give me the most imperfect circle group, small group, Sunday school class. If you are desiring to see people come to know Jesus Christ, hey, listen, I would take that any day. This is the goal. This is the goal. And then he even goes on to say, whom I shall see for myself, and my eyes shall behold, not another, how my heart yearns within me. I was at Relay for Life yesterday and talking to one of the administrators, and he said, the hardest thing is to give people hope. Because many times, because of cancer, even before cancer has taken their life, a year and a half before that, they start dying. Because mentally, they've lost hope. How amazing it is, as this man is sitting on that ash heap, and as he is sort of wasting away, his friends start talking to him. He starts talking to them. The purpose of that meeting is very thoughtful. There was an appointment. There was a plan. Here's what we're going to go do. At the end of that, guess what? He is seeing the need for Christ. And in the final chapter, Job chapter 42, verse 5, he says, I have heard of you by the hearing of the ear, but now my eye sees you. What do we want from those circles, small groups, Sunday school? Folks, listen, you want those people to walk away seeing Jesus Christ. They've heard Jesus all their life. Now they want to see Jesus walk with them through that divorce, walk with them through the waywardness of their child, walk with them through that cancer or that surgery. That's the goal. I talked about Bernard Shaw saying something about God answered the wrong question. Here I'm going through suffering, and he is asking about who made the hippopotamus. Another writer by the name of Victor Hugo. Anybody here heard of Victor Hugo? Les Miserables, right? Listen to what he said. He said, tomorrow, if all literature was to be destroyed, and it was left to me to retain one work only, I should save Job. Job is not some primitive book, some depressing book, some pointless book. Job talks about creation. It talks about sin, fallenness, sickness. It talks about the Redeemer, the mediator. And Job also talks about how we need one another to point each other to Christ, the value of friendship. He said, if I had only one book, Job will do it. Now, I don't know where you are this morning, and I don't know if you were prepared for a message like this. But the challenge to you is stop being a caveman or a cave woman. God has designed us to work in fellowship. Find you that place where you can be a part of a group. Leaders of our group, whether it's Sunday school, Bible study, circle, small group, know that the goal of your group is not just to vent, is not just to be yourself. The goal of the group is to help people going through trials to see Jesus Christ. Job's friend left everything, came together with a plan of action. Said all the wrong things once they start speaking, but in the process, he saw Jesus Christ. There's so much more I don't have time to get into. But do you know Jesus Christ? I don't believe any message is preached here just to preach a message. You may be getting ready to go through a very difficult time. You say, I need God, right? Yes, you need God, you need Jesus Christ. You also need the fellowship of godly people in your life. Could this be that this is the time? Usually people complain on the other side and say, no one came to see me, nobody cares, nobody called. I'm like, do you call people? Do you care? Do you go to see? Do you connect? Maybe this is a challenge for you to go ahead and make those connections, have those friends. And if you do not know Jesus Christ, today's a day. Give your life to him. Your world may be upside down tomorrow, but if Jesus is with you, you'll be right side up.